So good evening, everybody, and welcome to Then and Now. This is a local history lecture series co-sponsored by the Livermore Public Library and the Livermore Heritage Guild. And my name is Blanche Angelo. I'm a librarian at the library, and my co-host this evening is Andrea Lloyd from the Heritage Guild. We're so lucky to have Richard Finn, the Livermore City historian, back with us for another great presentation on our rich local history, this time about the Cowboys and Ranchers of the Livermore Valley. And just to remind you that your video and your audio is turned off in this webinar. So if you want to ask any questions about Richard's presentation, you can go ahead and type those into the Q&A, and we will gather those questions together and we'll pose them to Richard at the end of his presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to Andrea now. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you, Blanche. Hi, this is Andrea Lloyd from the Livermore Heritage Guild. And we're very happy to co-sponsor Richard's talk tonight on the Cowboys and Ranchers of Livermore Valley. As of course everyone knows, Richard is our city historian, and he's also now a local author. He has just recently published a book on the plaques of Livermore, which some of us were lucky enough to attend his talks on that, and some of us have been able to go on his walks. And speaking of ranches, actually on Sunday we have an open house at the Hageman Ranch. We have lots of things for the kids to do, and including lots of Halloween activities. And also Richard will be there, and you'll have an opportunity to have his book signed if you wish to. So I just thought I'd throw in that shameless plug for our lovely Hageman Ranch. So without further ado, Richard, I won't take up any more of your time.
Okay, thank you, ladies. Tonight we've got a lot of area to cover, so let's get going. I want to talk a little bit about the earliest days of ranching here in the valley, and then what I call the old days. This is obviously after the earliest days, but before more modern times, if you will, and then what's happening right now and what might be happening in the future as far as ranching here in the valley goes. Okay, it started actually with Mission San Jose. And when each mission was founded, they were allotted 18 cattle, 4 swine, plus horses, sheep and goats, and mules. Now, by 1831, Mission San Jose had 12,000 cattle, 11,000 sheep, and 1,100 horses. And the Livermore Valley then was used as grazing land for the mission. And it turns out that Mission San Jose produced the most agricultural products of any mission in the entire system in California. Okay, after the missions were broken up, their lands were sold, and Robert Livermore then, after working on several ranchos in the San Jose area, came to the valley, and we know he brought cattle to his ranch here in the valley as early as 1831. Now, we found a probate for when he died in 1858, and at that time he had 1,919 head of rodeo cattle, which I'm not sure exactly what rodeo cattle means. He had 226 head of gentle cattle, 700 head of branded cattle. And so you see there's some differences, and 43 gentle horses and 180 wild horses. And before the gold rush days, cattle was raised for hides and tallow. But when the gold rush started, there was a tremendous need for meat for the miners. And that made Robert Livermore a wealthy man, a very wealthy man. And as an aside, we might tell you that cattle hide was called the California banknotes. I thought that was kind of interesting. Now, this photograph shows the Livermore Ranch headquarters. And this was very near where Portola Avenue crosses over the freeway. And you can see on the right side is his around the horn house, his wooden house. And that's said to be the first wooden house in the Tri-Valley. Before that, all the houses were adobe, including Livermore's first house. Now, at the other end of the valley was Jose Maria Amador, and he owned Rancho San Ramon. And he was an interesting guy, a very interesting guy. He was a soldier, a rancher, and a gold miner. He had a school, a town, a creek, a county, and a valley named after him. At one time, it said that he owned about 20,000 acres, but when he died, he had nothing. At one time, he had about 300 workers. He was married 3 times and had 22 children and large herds of cattle. The next man that's important in our story is William Mendenhall. Now, a lot of you know that William Mendenhall was the founder of the town of Livermore, laid it out in 1869 when the Transcontinental Railroad went through our area. But before that, he raised cattle on over 15,000 acres up in the mountains south of Livermore. And there was a big drought in 1864, and he lost most of his cattle. And then he went on to become more of a land developer. Later in his life, he became the largest breeder of Angora goats in all of California. Now, here's portraits of caricatures of 3 of the interesting ranchers and farmers in our area. And the one on the left then is Peter Wilson, who owned sheep and cattle about where Mines Road crosses a bridge. Mines Road is fairly flat, crosses a bridge, and then gets really steep on the other side. Well, that's called Wilson Grade. That whole area in there was owned by Wilson. The fellow in the middle picture is George Johnston, and he was a very wealthy man. He owned lots of land out in the Midway area and raised tremendous numbers of sheep. And in downtown Pleasanton, there's a really great brick building, and right on the top, it says Johnston Building. And so he owned real estate too, besides a lot of ranching and farming land. And then on the right, then we have Michael Mulqueeny, who was a major sheep and cattle raiser in Midway. And the Mulqueeny family still owns a great deal of land out in that area. Okay, this picture is kind of a fun picture, I think. It shows, the picture was titled The Roundup Boys. And somebody, and I can't find what I did with it, but somebody identified the man in the middle or a little bit to the right who has the jug and apparently is wearing a suit. And I can't find who that is, but apparently is related to somebody that still lives here in the valley. But apparently this is a typical early day gang of folks that are going to work at a roundup. This was an interesting picture I found in the Heritage Guild files. And we all know about the Olivina Ranch, and Olivina means olives and vines. But here is the Olivina pasture, and you can see they had quite a bit of cattle. And we'll have to figure out from the scenery here exactly where that was. But apparently it's where somewhere around where Sycamore Grove Park is right now. Okay, the next picture shows some children and ladies out at the home ranch. The home ranch was on what's now Stanley Boulevard. And so the Holmes and then the lady in the back married into the Rasmussen family. Those are both families that are still very active with lots and lots of descendants here in the valley to this very day. Okay, this picture is kind of interesting. This is the Nickerson farm that was up in the Altamontes. and they raised grain, cattle, and sheep. And right down at the bottom, I don't know if you can see it, but here is a fellow by the name of Nathaniel. He went by Andy Nickerson. Maybe some of you knew of him. Okay, the house that's right in the middle, dead center in the middle of the picture, was remodeled in the 1940s, and that is now the office for the Altamont landfill. Now, all this land in the back up in here is where the Altamont landfill is now. So that's the old Nickerson Ranch. And quite a change. Okay, things changed a whole lot in 1869 when the trains went through Livermore, stopped in Livermore. It made a huge difference in the cattle business. Instead of driving cattle then from the valley all the way to the East Bay to the slaughterhouses, they were able to ship them by rail. So big difference, a lot easier on the cattle, and they didn't lose nearly so much weight. Now, this is an interesting picture that Jim Allen took. Alan Frank supplied to me. This picture we think was taken about 1945, and and let's see, the last cattle drive from Livermore by train, the last shipment was in 1968, so not terribly long ago. And it looks to me in this picture that the cattle are coming north on Maple Street, and then crossing the train tracks here, and then they'll turn left and go to a holding pen for the railroad. Okay, this picture is kind of interesting. You know, all the cowboys and ranchers, most of them anyway, would have their horses shoed. And there were a number of blacksmith shops in Livermore. And this one stood exactly where Blacksmith Square is now. And right in the middle, you'll notice a tree. Let's see if I can highlight that for you. Right here in the middle is a tree, and you'll notice it's made out of horse. Whoop. Oh, no. Oops, sorry, I don't know what happened there, but I think we're okay. Okay, horses were a really big deal in Livermore, and lots of really large horses were raised here. And there was a horse show, excuse me, every year, sometimes more than once a year. And often it was downtown, right by the old city hall, which is the building. You may not recognize it in this picture, but it was stuccoed and changed to kind of an Art Deco stucco job over it. But that's the old city hall, directly across from what's now the Bankhead Theater. Anyway, raising horses was a big thing. A lot of buyers would come from Oakland and San Francisco to buy these large horses to pull their wagons, and then farmers and ranchers would buy them to pull their wagons and combines and so on. Uh-oh. Okay, my picture is not turning here. I'm sorry, I got a little problem. Okay, now they're in sync again. This is kind of interesting. This is some other pictures in the book that I helped Ann Holman with, called Vasco's Livermore, and these are caricatures that were made in 1910 by an artist from Australia who went around the world then, and to pay for it, he would stop at saloon bars and make caricatures of people and charge them either 50 cents or a drink. And so luckily for us, we have, I think there's over 40, if I remember right. and gives us an idea what these men look like. Okay, on the left then is Hans Christensen, who was very active and was in charge then of many horse shows here in town. A lot of Christensen descendants still live here in the valley. In the middle was Theodore Gorner, who was a businessman downtown. Now he owned horses, but from what we can find out, he never showed any of his own horses. And then finally, the picture on the right was John Sweeney, who was very active in the horse show business. Now, the weather could be a huge problem, just like it is now. It was a major problem. I talked already about how Mendenhall lost most of his cattle because of the drought. But there were several floods that were devastating, and lots of cattle and sheep died, and they drowned in these floods. Okay, here's a picture of Lassen Brothers where the water's starting to go into their warehouse. And this picture shows the old McLeod building, and that is the site, many of you probably know, that is the site where the Bank of Italy later, this building was torn down, the Bank of Italy was built here, and then the Livermore Independent newspaper now has their great building right on that corner. But you can see how high the water is. It's going over the wheels of the wagon. And most of the water that came into town came from the Arroyo Mocho. And this picture was dated, it was 1906. So lots of problems, and lots of, again, a lot of cattle and sheep drowned. This picture shows flooding at 2nd Street and South Livermore Avenue. And it looks like they're trying to build kind of a little levee or a dam across 2nd Street to keep the water from going west. And this water too definitely was from the Arroyo Mocho. So water was a big problem. Now let's talk a little bit about schooling. The ranchers' children might have gone to any number of the many country schools. And this is one of the very smallest. This site now is out at Del Val Reservoir, and it in fact may be underwater. It's, if not underwater, it's very close to it. There's a little argument exactly where the school was, but it's a little bit north of where the big bridge crosses the Arroyo. Or the kids might have gone to the Highland School. There's 2 Highland schools. This one is on South Flynn Road, where it meets North Flynn Road, was the Highland School. And then in Contra Costa County, just over our county line, is the other Highland School, which was much larger and much more substantial, and a much newer school than this one. But notice the very few students in these pictures. Most of these schools were very small, and most didn't stay around terribly long. This one in Midway did. I can't remember offhand, but I think it was well into the 1940s that this school is still in operation. And this is the school that the Heritage Guild wants to move to Livermore, and hopefully we'll be able to put next to Hageman Ranch on Olivina Street. Okay, hay and grain was a big thing. Barley and wheat and hay started to be more profitable than cattle and sheep. And so that was grown on the flatter parts of the valley. And then up in the hills and the mountains where the cattle were raised. And also grain crops up in the hills. Now here's a typical ranch wagon. And most of the ranches, as far as I can tell, were about 160 acres. Some of them were much larger, but a lot were 160 acres. what we call a quarter of a section. And times are pretty tough. Notice the children up on top of the wagon helping, I assume, their father then load hay. And we found out that for each cow or horse, it needed about a ton of hay to be fed to them during the winter time because of a lack of food on the ground for them. And this picture shows horses pulling a threshing machine. Looks to me there's 9 horses here. And so again, if each one of them takes at least a ton of hay per winter, and here's 9, so that's 9 ton right there. And he may have had a lot more horses than that. Some of the outfits had really, really large teams, and they might have so many for this, but then they had so many for other type machines and all that, all working at the same time. Yeah, this picture is another interesting one. Right at the end, this is L Street. You probably don't recognize it. I didn't. This is L Street right here. And this crossed here is First Street. And right here on the southwest corner of L and First was the Valley Hotel. And then this area right in here is where Growth Brothers was. And now they're building those really large buildings. All along the train tracks were a number of warehouses, and Ansbachers owned several, I forget how many, I think 4 or 5 they owned, but other people owned a lot of warehouses too. And this was for storage of the grain and hay that was shipped out of the valley then, which was a big industry here in the area. Okay, now if you're a rancher or a cowboy, you didn't stay on the ranch all the time. You might go to town. So if you came into Livermore, you might have stayed at the Washington Hotel. And the Washington Hotel was right at the corner where the donut wheel is now. It was exactly at the same place. Or you might have stayed across the street at the Valley Hotel. We said that was again at the southwest corner of L Street and First Street. And this was the first building in town that had concrete sidewalks. And it's said to be the first building in town that had a bathroom that had both hot and cold running water. So that was kind of neat. There are a number of stables where you might have taken your horses. It's hard to see, but if you could look real close on the top of that wagon, it says it belongs to the Tesla stagecoach. And so this went out to Tesla, I think it was twice a day then. Here's a picture of downtown. And on the left is the Oddfellows building. And there were a number of stores in that sold all kind of assorted things all along First Street. For entertainment, there were a lot of things to do. There were a lot of dances to go to. And in the early days, there were the silent movies, and then later the talkie movies. This is a picture of the 1935 rodeo. And we found out in 1935, 16,000 people attended the rodeo. And you can see the large stadium. Now this building is right about where the police station and the city hall are now on South Livermore Avenue. This picture shows the grand entry in 1949, and you'll recognize the names on there again: Holmes, Rasmussen, Wayne and Tilly Calhoun, Patsy Home. All again, and you can see the large arena is still there. Then eventually it was condemned then as a rickety old wooden building, and then the new stadium was built out at Robinson Park. Okay, the Cowboys might have gone to one of the many saloons. Livermore was not a very big place around 1900, but there were many, many saloons, way more than there were churches. And some of them had interesting names. Some of my favorites were the Magnolia, the Cuckoo, the Central, the Fat Boy Bar, and the one that we got the caricatures, the 1910 caricatures, they came from Dan's place. Originally, they were in the Hub, which is right at the corner of Livermore Avenue and First Street, the northwest corner, which was removed. Then that building was removed, and that's where Lizzie Fountain is now. Some people ask, what was that little boy doing behind the bar? And I don't know. Somebody suggested it was probably his job to clean out the spittoons. Another thing you might want to do if you came to town was to go to one of the parades. And in this one, it looks like not too many people took advantage of that. There's hardly anybody watching the parade, very, very few people. A lot more people in the parade than watching it. Now, right in the middle of the picture is the Oddfellows Hall. And then the building on the left where it says Central Merchandise, that was the William Taylor Company's building. And that's now Tacos and Tequila. And that building has had an interesting life. It's been a grocery store, an undertaker's, furniture store, auto painting shop, among many, many other things over the years. Excuse me just a second. Now, if you were a rancher that made some money, you might want to go out to the highway garage run by Frank Duarte, and you might have your car fixed on. And if you were really well off, you might buy a new car from him, maybe a Durant or a Star. And I might point out on the right side of the picture is L Street then. And there were, at one time was a big arch that went over the top of L Street. And L Street definitely was the main road into town from the west. And in fact, in the earlier days, Livermore Avenue didn't cross the train tracks. So if you wanted to get into town, you crossed here, or you went down to Junction or what became Portola. Now, right in front of the Duarte garage was the old Lincoln Highway. And you can see how close that is to the building, much, much closer than Portola Street is now, but very, very close. And on the left, you can see the water tower on top of the tank house. And that tank house is still there and is rented out, as a matter of fact. And the Heritage Guild, you can see they had the Duarte garage painted very much like it was in the early days. Okay, I'm not sure how many of the Cowboys, but a lot of the ranchers belonged to lodges in town. So they would come into town and might become a member of any number of lodges. Some of them actually belonged to several lodges at the same time. So if you're Danish, you might belong to the Daniel Hall, and you can see all the people lined up in front of the Daniel Hall. If you were Portuguese, you might go and become a member of the Brotherhood of the Divine Holy Spirit. There was also the Oddfellows, the Masons, Son of Herman, that was for people of German descent. And anyway, there were many, many others. So even though the town was small, there were many, many lodges that both men and women belonged to, way, way more than there are now. Okay, let's talk about going to the doctor. Most of the cowboys and ranchers certainly would have been born at home. Some of them might have been born in a doctor's office. Now, this house was the home and office of Dr. Gordon on the northwest corner of 4th and K. Now, you may recognize this house. This is the one that's now out at Canyon Winery and has been restored, and at least the exterior. I'm not sure about the interior, but the exterior has been restored and looks very, very nice. In later years, it turns out that a lot of ranchers, in fact, and their families, the children were born here at St. Paul's Hospital. And also, if you had to have any operation here in the Valley, you probably went to St. Paul's. Okay, let's talk about world famous cowboys that came from the Valley at one time or another. And the most famous was Johnny Snyder. He was the world champion all-around cowboy in 1931. He was the world champion bull rider in 1929, 1930, 1932, the best all-around cowboy in Australia in 1935 and 36, and Hawaiian Islands top cowboy in 1939, among a long, long list of other awards. The other person that we want to mention for sure is Billy Ward. Billy Ward went to his first rodeo when he was only 13, and he had a 20-year career, and ended up then on the Walker Ranch at the end of Mendenhall Road, and lived up there. In 1956, he was riding a very famous horse, and the picture of that, the logo for the Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association, their belt buckle then shows Billy Ward then. He, and also, as I note, he won many rodeo events all over the world. Okay, many other well-known rodeo cowboys have come from the Valley, and here is a listing of some of them. And as a matter of fact, right now there's a lot of young boys and girls that are doing quite well in rodeo, and their names will certainly be added to a list like this. No question about that. Okay, let's talk about some of the ranchers that have made a mark here in the Valley. And one of them is the View family. A lot of property, big operations in the hills of around Sunol, and also in the Altamont area. And on the left picture, you can see the branding iron of Alview's in 1939. We're going to talk about brands in just a little bit. And here's a picture of a roundup in 1939. Here they are again, rounding up, looks like a calf, going to be branded and castrated and given shots and so on. Now this is up on Mines Road at the home ranch, Circle H Ranch, and they're harvesting mountain oysters. If you don't know what a mountain oyster is, find a cowboy and you can ask them. Okay, the right picture shows Tony and Blanche George, and they were caretakers at the Circle H Ranch for many years. Now look at Blanche. She's holding a rifle, and I understand she was not a person that you wanted to mess around with. So we'll have to find out if that's a true story or not. But I understand both of them really nice people. Okay, here's a roundup. Guys getting ready for a roundup at the Circle H, and you'll recognize some of these names: Tony George, Wayne Calhoun, Dick Holmes, and a number of other, Gary Holmes, Rich Holmes, and so on. So, and we'll see in other pictures, it takes a lot of people to do a roundup. Now here's the Andretti Rose cattle drive, and up on Cedar Mountain, the roads are pretty tough, even nowadays. And so it's, you don't see any, from what I understand, you don't see any pickups with long stock trailers like you do down here on the valley floor. And so there, in the old days, and the Holmes people did this too, they might drive cattle a long ways from one of their ranches to another. And this picture, I understand, they were moving cattle from Mendenhall Springs area to the Andrati Brothers Ranch on Cedar Mountain. And about halfway there, then there was a big stock pond, and the cattle, I guess, could smell the water, and they rushed down to it. They said the calves to cool off. Then if it was a hot day, the calves would actually go in the ponds and take a little swim. And here they're moving people then from one place to another to help out with the that in the truck then is Dorothy Andrade Rose, and there's other folks in the truck. So some of you probably know Christine Andrade Jacobson, and Rusty Rose, Ray Brown, and Vern Rose are all in the truck. Okay, now as times got rougher and the property taxes really started going up in the late 1940s and the 1950s, a lot of the ranchers couldn't make a living working full time on their ranch. And so they went to work for other businesses. And a lot of them, it turns out, went to work for the Kaiser Sand and Gravel Company. And so these guys called themselves the Kaiser Cowboys, even though none of them were Kaisers. And there's a Van Arkel in here, Hackman, Rose, Lefevre, and another Hackman getting ready to round up some cattle, it looks like. Okay, the ranching tradition still lives on here in the valley, we're happy to say. And here's a brand then that's used now by the Andrade family. It's the Rocking RA, and we'll show you a few brands in just a bit. And a lot of brands, most brands, I guess to be legal, must be registered with the state of California. Now there's a number of brands that are not registered. And what would happen if an animal was stolen that didn't have a registered brand? I'm not sure. Maybe somebody can help us with that. But not only are cattle branded, but sometimes horses are. And this was an example of a good reason to not only brand your cattle, but all your horses. And Robin Sacco passed this story on to me. Just want to read it to you real fast. That the newer brands then are not from heated irons in a fire, but actually are cooled and do the imprint by using liquid nitrogen. Okay, the horses are not required to be branded in California, but it's still a very effective means of identification. This mare was stolen in 2018, and through very effective Facebook alerts offering a reward for her return and good police work, the sheriff's deputies were able to locate the mare very quickly. Friends as far away as Texas and Montana spread the word to try and find her. With a prominent brand, she was easy to identify, and you can see that in the photo, and was back home in just 2 days. So this was a happy ending, but many stolen horses are never found. And that's a sad story. Since we lived on Mines Road, I've heard of cattle that have just flat out disappeared. And what happened to them, I guess we don't know. It's a sad story. Over at the Matson Ranch, at the when the pumpkin patch is done, they let the cattle in. And boy, the cattle really like the pumpkins. One of the things we found, though, you kind of have to break the pumpkins open. Cattle don't know that. I guess they're not smart enough to know if they stomp on a pumpkin, they can break it. But once it's broken open, they just have a field day. Okay, now I want to talk about a fellow named Thomas Carneal. Now, he was a farmer and a rancher. And it turned out, I just found out this week, he was also a whiskey maker during Prohibition. And he owned 2,357 acres on both sides of Highland Road, right where Carneal Road intersects, right in that general area there. And he was way, way ahead of his time. He developed wheat that won the Grand Prix gold medal at the 1900 World's Fair that was held in Paris. So he was claimed to be the finest wheat in the world. And he was quite a guy. You see, he only had one arm. Before he came to California, he lost his left arm then in a train accident. But he was quite a guy. He was trained as a lawyer, and then when his mother died, he inherited this property and took it over. And a long story about him. Hopefully, there will be a book soon, and we're going to learn a lot more about him. Well, look how high this picture I wanted to show you. These pictures are all by Tom Reinstein, who lives in Carneal's house, it turns out, at the end of the private road. Let's see, if Carneal Road went across, it was still paved. At the very end of that road going north towards the base of Mount Diablo is the headquarters for the Reinstein Ranch. And then the Reinsteins then became owners of about a quarter of the Carneal property. But look in this picture, you can see how high the wheat is. It's over this man's head, Henry Reinstein. So he's the second generation Reinstein that was on that farm. And here they're doing some branding. And again, you can see how many people it takes to do a branding operation. We're going to see that in some pictures from some of the other ranching families. And this picture shows the fifth generation of Reinsteins that have helped work on the Reinstein Ranch, fifth generation. So, and there's other families that I think are either that close or awful close to it that have been around for a long, long time. Yeah. Now here's John Kiley's roundup in Palomares Canyon. Again, look at all the people required to do the job. And here's Paul Banky up at Del Val, 1864. And here's the Sacco branding in the 1990s. And again, a lot of people are required to do these brandings. Now, sometimes the ranchers, cowboys just have fun. This is out the Basso Ranch out north of town in 2016. And I think they still do that. They get together and kind of a miniature rodeo operation. And here's the fellow. He, unfortunately for him, he missed that calf. Here is on Mines Road on the old Rivoli property is some of David and Lori Porter's cattle. You know, when we moved to Mines Road, almost everybody had Hereford cattle. And over the years now, that's changed. Almost everybody has Angus or an Angus cross. One of the things you need if you have cattle or horses, you got to have a good vet. And here the vet is, this horse had some real teeth problems. And so she did some filing on the teeth and apparently made the horse happy. And a lot of people have dogs. And this dog's Jet is a real kick. Now, dogs also take care and take training. And a well-trained cattle dog, I understand, can be worth about $20,000. So if you want to train dogs and you got some good stock and you got the right mixture of different breeds, these dogs are really, really smart. Okay, now let's head towards the final here. Many people think of ranching as being very romantic. And you get to see great landscapes and you get to go on great horseback rides and you don't have any worries and all that. Well, it turns out some of that's true and some of it's not true. Talking to different ranchers, it turns out ranching can be a very, very hard business with lots of uncertainty. And we found out there were huge floods, big floods in 1861, 62, and also in 1906. And there were other minor floods off and on before and after that. and there was a terrible drought. Look at that, right after the huge floods, which a lot of people lost, a tremendous number of animals drowned during those floods. The 1816, the winter of 1816 flood. But on the next year, there was a huge drought, and there was no water, and that's when Mendenhall lost all his cattle. And then in the 1970s, a lot of you will remember in was it 76, 77, around there, the same thing, tremendous droughts. And of course, the last few years have not been kind to us either. Another thing you got to worry about, of course, is disease like the hoof and mouth disease. And if you're a farmer or rancher, you've got to have skills. You got to know when to buy and sell animals, when to buy and sell the grain, the hay, and so on. You got to know how to repair fences and buildings and your trucks, your cars, your equipment, and so on. And one of the things that I see in our area, and I've heard other people talk about it, is you got to know how to handle intruders. Across the road from us at Matson's, I was down at the mailbox, and these people stopped, and they had two German shepherds. They picked them up, put them over Matson's fence, and let them run after the cattle. And I said, "What the heck are you doing?" And they says, "Oh yeah, the dogs like to have fun." And you know, I don't know. People seem to think that if it's open land, it's public land, and they can do anything with it they want to do. Okay, here's a flood we had. Let's see, when was it? About 10 years ago. So flooding can be a big problem. This is the road into Friedendahl's place, just north of the Matson Ranch. Another big problem this year, or last year rather, was the big fire, the SU fire. That, what was that? Close to 400,000 acres, and burned a lot of ranch land up in the hills. In 5 different counties actually. So fire can be a big problem. You can burn your crops, and in this case, it burned down miles and miles and miles of fences. Okay, very few ranchers, as far as I can tell, very few do not have outside jobs. And the few ranchers that do stay home most of the time have a wife that works in town. And talking to Daryl Sweet, he says he thinks the average valley cattle operation now is about 50 cows. And at one time, it looked like N3 cattle, what is that, just south of Del Valle Reservoir, had maybe 3,000 cattle. There's, Daryl says, there's about the same number of cows now as there was 10 years ago. And now that may have been knocked down because of the drought. We see a lot of cattle being trucked out. There's certainly less cows now than there were 50 years ago. Now, one of the ways farmers, ranchers can make money is by windmills. And you'll see a lot of ranch land now has windmills. And so they get compensation then from the windmill companies. This is a great picture that Josie Foscolina passed on. Was taken by Phil Doyle. To me, it's a wonderful picture of the dust, the cowboys, and all that. So this is branding at the Mulqueeny Ranch. And here's Josie Foscolina when she was a little girl with her grandfather, Don View. And here she is now, earlier this year, barrel racing at Salinas. Here's a picture of a son showing his, or father rather, showing his son, the son's first calf, the first calf that was given to him. And this is Sean and Ryan Wells in 2009. And here's the little Josie's daughter, Prime View Roan, and she's already competing in junior rodeo. And this happens to be at the Rowell Ranch. And here she is on her horse Ruby in the Pee Wee barrel racing. And then to wrap it up, I want you, if you haven't done it, I would like you to go downtown to the Stockman's Park. And around the park, there are brands. And I want you to look at the brands. And hopefully, in the next year or two, we can put together a book or a booklet with the information then, what the brands mean, what they stand for, all these different symbols, and who are the families in behind these brands. It turns out when you go down there, there's 204 brands in the concrete. And they were made from sketches that cattlemen gave to the city. And then they were taken by an artist then. And so that the thickness of the indent and so on was somewhat similar. And so anyway, just a tremendous job. So 204 of them down there. So a big operation. Okay, now if you had cowboy cookies, I wish Blanche and Andrea, I wish we could pass out cowboy cookies, but since it's Zoom, we can't do that. So I ask people or offer people, go get a copy of the Home Family Cookbook. And I think that's available at a number of places. I know it's down at the Carnegie Building. And try make some of those, see what you think. Okay, we talked about the brand book. We're also thinking of making a book with stories and photographs, somewhat like what we've shown here, of the families, the different families that have been in the valley for some time, and how they've changed over the years, how the families have grown, and how their ranching operations have done. So anyway, if you can help with either one of those projects, we sure appreciate it. And so if you'd email me, that would be wonderful. And if not, you can leave messages for me down at the Carnegie Building, and they'll get them to me. I want to thank a lot of people that helped give me information, loan me information, pictures, and so on. And I really appreciate it. It's been very helpful. Couldn't have done it without their help, that's for sure. And now let's wrap it up. Blanche, I'm going to stop share screen so we can see what's going on. Okay, do you have it now?
All right, you have quite a few questions, Richard.
Yeah.
Let's see, we'll start with the first one. How did Livermore and other places in California come to have so many gum trees?
Boy, who asked that question? That's not fair. I don't, what I do know is on the other side of the hills, they planted gum trees, or eucalyptus as some of us call them. They were going to use them for railroad ties. And it turns out in Australia, there's a type of eucalyptus that's straight grain. But unfortunately, for whoever had the great idea of bringing eucalyptus to California, the kind they brought does not work out. They're going to use them for railroad ties and also to make furniture. The problem is, if any of you have eucalyptus, once it starts drying, it starts twisting. And if you cut a eucalyptus open and just let it sit for a long time, it starts cracking every which way. So it's absolutely useless for ties or for furniture. Here in the valley, I think most of the eucalyptus was planted for windbreaks. I know where I live, there's eucalyptus that's way over 100 years old now, and use it for windbreaks. I actually, much to some people's disgust, I planted 100 eucalyptus in the back of my place for firewood, but enough branches fall off of those down on the road and some from those behind my house that I've never cut any down. So they're still back there. So I think that's the main thing here in the valley is windbreaks.
All right, thanks. You have another one. My great grandfather was a Henry Lucero who migrated to Colorado from the Bay Area in 1864. Any of the Henrys ranchers here in Livermore? That was posed by Tony Lucero. So his great grandfather was a Henry.
Yeah, Henry's a very well known name. And apparently I'd have to, if he could email me, I'll see what I have. There were several Henry families. Probably the most famous actually was the Henrys that ran the Herald newspaper. But I don't think they were related. I don't believe anyway. Yeah, if he could email me, I'd sure like to share information.
Okay, I have a question for you, Richard. Someone wanted to know if Enos Road in Livermore was named after Manuel Enos.
I'm not sure which Enos. Enos is an old Portuguese name. Lots and lots of Portuguese people lived here in the valley, a very, very large number. And then some of them moved down to the Central Valley. And it's my understanding now that about half the dairy farmers in the Central Valley are Portuguese descendants. But as far as exactly who Enos Street was named after, I don't know. We might look in Ann Holman's A to Z book. For those of you that are really interested in Livermore history, you've got to pick up Ann Holman's A to Z book. That lots and lots of information. And Andrea may know, I'm not sure that I do, but I think there's only about a dozen or so copies left at the Heritage Guild, so they're not going to last too much longer. So if you want one, you better get one soon.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I refer to it all the time. I was one of the first books I bought when I actually moved to Livermore, and I use it frequently. Also, I got a little bit of a fun fact here from you that one of the participants tonight wanted you to know that Johnny Schneider is recognized in the Cowboy Hall of Fame in Oklahoma.
Yes, yeah, no, he's known all over the world. Now, there's supposed, we just released that book of plaques, Livermore plaques, which is available at the Heritage Guild at the Carnegie Building. Now, I was told there's a Snyder plaque at the rodeo grounds. I walked around there and I talked to people that work there, and nobody seems to know where it is. If it's really there, I'd sure appreciate hearing from somebody if they could tell me exactly where it is.
Well, that's good. There's homework for someone tonight.
Yes.
Richard, where was Cedar Mountain?
Okay, Cedar Mountain is, what is that, south? It's off of Mines Road. Let's see, where is it? I think behind the Mendenhall Ranch. Is somebody that knows if there's any of the Home family listening tonight, if they'd let us pop in there. I think it's just south of the Mendenhall Ranch, up in the hills there, or maybe we call them mountains because they start to get pretty steep.
And someone also wanted to know about the information, if you could repeat it, about the tree in the middle of Blacksmith Square.
Okay, that tree, best I can tell, looking at the photographs with a magnifying glass, it looks like it's all made out of horseshoes. That apparently they just stacked the horseshoes up and
Wow.
made this tree, which looked to be quite large. So I imagine there must be hundreds and hundreds of horseshoes in that.
Yeah, and there's another question. Actually, I actually noticed this too when I saw the picture. When you had the picture of the Roundup boys, there was a woman there on the horse. Do you know who she was?
No, I don't. And again, if anybody can identify the people in that picture, I'd sure appreciate it. I don't know who they are. again, somebody years ago, when I first saw that photo, I was showing it to somebody. And if I remember right, they told me that they were related somehow to that man, the man with the whiskey jug, but I don't remember who it was. And I don't know who the woman was or what her, what she did at the roundup.
And Loretta would like to know where we can get some of those seeds for that 6-feet wheat. We'd love to have that in our Hageman Ranch garden.
Well, I think we could talk to Tom Reinstein.
Oh, okay.
Because from what I understand, he is now making whiskey, and hopefully we can get him as a speaker. He's got a very interesting book coming out then about Tom Cornell. And he, you know, we talked about he made whiskey during the Prohibition. There's a lot of canyons that are real deep and narrow on the what is that, the south side of Mount Dabble. And years ago, somebody took me back in there, and they pointed out where they knew some of these stills were. And apparently it was so hard to get in there that the federal agents never got in there. Where Cornell had his stills, I have no idea. I suppose it was back in there somewhere. But yeah, we'll have to find out if we can get some of that wheat. But yeah, I'd never seen wheat that high, over 6 feet tall.
Yeah, oh, and Jeff Caskey actually made a comment. There's another photo of the horseshoe tree. It's actually in the Hageman Ranch blacksmith shop. So
okay.
And so if anyone wants to come and have a look at that, again, the ranch is open on Sunday. It's open from 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock, and costumes are encouraged for this Sunday.
Oh, that'll be fun. That's going to be.
And it's free. We open it once a month free, and we try to get as much activities for our kids to get them out and playing, and all the old fashioned stuff. And of course, Richard will be there this Sunday with his book on plaques, and he will be signing them.
Richard, I have to tell you, I'm really impressed with Mendenhall and all the Angora goats.
Yeah, I
didn't realize that.
Well, apparently towards the end of his life, he somehow, for some reason, really got into Angora goats, and eventually had the largest herd. Goats have herds? I don't know what you call it, but anyway, the largest grouping of goats in California. And I guess he won all kinds of prizes all over the place.
I had no idea. See, the things you learn from Richard Finn.
I tell you.
Another great presentation.
Well,
Yes,
thank you. And we thank everybody for listening.
And the fact that a horse in the winter has 1 ton of hay per day, that'll keep
this is for the winter.
In the winter, but that's a lot of hay.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It's one ton per the whole winter.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
That's a lot of hay still.
Still a lot.
Otherwise, we'd have awful fat horses.
Yep, and we also, and the last comment that we had for the evening was actually off topic, but someone know if we knew what was happening with the totem pole. Alas, I don't have any updates. I don't know if anyone else does. If they do, please enter in the chat.
Everybody wants to know about the totem pole.
Yes, well, as Jeff says, Jeff Caxley, one of our former past presidents, and he says, we do keep bugging the city about it, and they're working on the pole. So hopefully there will be updates eventually. Keep bugging them, Jeff.
Well, Richard, you did an outstanding job. You always give us so much information, and it's great to know about all the history of the Cowboys and the ranchers here, especially with Stockman's Park recently opening, and with Livermore having such a famous rodeo. It's nice to know about the history of that part of Livermore's story.
Yeah, it's still called the world's fastest rodeo.
Yep.
And Richard, you got lots of thank yous. Everyone's is very happy for the having the information.
Well, I'm always happy to share what I know, and even more interested to hear from folks that can fill in a lot of the gaps.
And Richard, if people have stories to contribute, like you said, what would be the email to get a hold of you again?
Okay, it's rwfinn@yahoo.com.
Oh, yahoo.com. Perfect. Thanks.
Got it.
And Richard, can you just talk a little bit more about your plaque book, about the research that went into it?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly how it started, but it's been about 5 years, I guess, that we've been working on that with my seventh cousin, which some of you have met, who lives in London. And he got so interested in Livermore history that he is my main researcher now and has helped me quite a bit. And so we started putting together then this book. Again, it's been about a 5-year project. And we tried to get every single plaque that's available for the public to see. And so we have photographs then of the plaques. We have photographs of where they are, and a little bit of history then about who is the plaque was given to or in honor of, or the building that it was put on, what's so special about that building. And then with a great help from Linda Driver, she did the layout for us and did a tremendous job. And she came up with, I think, a very good idea. She made maps then. I forget, there's about 8 maps, if I remember right, that showed the exact location then where these plaques are. And so people can easily then drive around, walk around, and see the plaques. And some of them are what I thought were really out of the way places, but people would say, "Oh, do you know about this one? Do you know about that one?" And there may well be some more that we don't know about, but we'd like to get some more information. Any way they can help, we'd appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much, Richard. You did a fantastic job as always. And I did record this presentation, so we'll have it up on YouTube next week. And that'll be up on the library's YouTube channel. And then we'll be able to put the link out on the Heritage Guild's website, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Good. Perfect. I know whenever we have the Richard's presentations on YouTube, they get a lot of views on there. Especially your house presentations have been seen by many people. So it's great to have them up there.
Yes. Thanks again, Richard. We really appreciate it.
Well, I thank you, Andrea and Blanche, for your help. Did a great job. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming tonight, and we'll see you at the next Then and Now.
Yes. And good night, all. Thank you.
Good night.